At our pharmacy, Town and Country Compounding, you know this, we pride ourselves on our rigorous safety standards and compliance with both state, federal regulations. We consider ourselves in the top 1% of compounding pharmacies due our triple accreditation, PCAB, ACHC, and NABP, while many compounding pharmacies don't even have one accreditation. You've highlighted before that not all compounding pharmacies are alike. Can you speak to the importance of accreditation and the role of high quality testing in distinguishing high quality, responsible 503A pharmacies from the bad flavor you mentioned in your article?
Yeah, uh, let's start by saying that in our healthcare system, FDA approved drugs are the gold standard. If an FDA approved drug is judged to be appropriate for a patient by a prescriber and is available, is accessible, is not in shortage, the FDA approved drug is what should be prescribed and dispensed. But as we've seen over this 3-year period, FDA approved drugs are not always available. And in that instance, federal law, FDA guidance, and the laws of every state in the country allow compounded versions of FDA approved drugs to fill that gap. Compounded drugs are not FDA approved. How could a drug that is prescribed and dispensed for an N of one for an individual patient, how could all of those be individually approved by FDA? But drug makers and others have made the leap in their public statements that these drugs are not FDA approved, and so therefore they are somehow inherently unsafe. And that's nonsense. Compounding pharmacies, like Town and Country and many others, adhere to a rigorous compliance framework. It is not the same framework, not the current manufacturing practices that drug makers must adhere to, but it is a framework designed to ensure the safety of the patient who's going to take that customized compounded drug. And we're talking about the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. We're talking about numerous FDA guidance on everything from essentially a copy that allows the compounding of copies of FDA approved drugs, FDA guidance on insanitary conditions, and on a range of other things. We're talking about state law on top of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and FDA guidance. And then the overarching standards for the profession are from the U.S. Pharmacopoeia, the compounding chapters of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. And those are in one way or another incorporated into the laws of every state in the country. Standards of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia are sufficiently rigorous to assure that the pharmacies that adhere to them are taking care to protect patients. I know Town and Country does that, and numerous other compounding pharmacies across the country. So now we've been talking about semaglutide, tirzepatide, injectables. When we talk about the compounding of a copy, we're talking about Wegovy and Ozempic, the Novo products. Those are injectable. And we're talking about Zepbound and Mounjaro, manufactured by Lilly, injectables. Not just any pharmacy can prepare an injectable medication. Only a pharmacy that is a sterile compounding pharmacy and has a certified sterile compounding lab can do that. Among compounding pharmacies in the country, only about a quarter of those do sterile compounding. It is a higher standard. Talked about the chapters of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia. Chapter 797 of the U.S. Pharmacopoeia is about sterile compounding. And again, a rigorous standard that those pharmacies have to adhere to. On top of that, there are accreditations. You've already mentioned some of those. So PCAB accreditation, the Pharmacy Compounding Accreditation Board. See it over your shoulder there. NABP accreditation, settle. And pharmacies who are that are investing in high compliance, compounding with high integrity, pursue those accreditations. And so there are a large number of sterile compounding pharmacies across the country that have attained those accreditations. Now, does that mean that a pharmacy that, and you're not going to like me saying this, Steve, does that mean that a pharmacy that doesn't have an accreditation is somehow being cavalier and is not compounding with integrity? It doesn't mean that at all. It does mean that those that have attained those accreditations are bound to adhere to a higher standard and are regularly inspected to determine that they are adhering to that high standard. And so we encourage compounding pharmacies to pursue accreditations by PCAB, NABP, and others as well. Board certification. of pharmacists and technicians in the sterile compounding space is important as well. I could go on, but you can be sure that if you're a patient, if you are being dispensed a sterile compounded drug from a state licensed pharmacy, you can have some confidence that drug has been compounded to the proper standard because those state licensed pharmacies are regularly inspected by the State Board of Pharmacy. I know Town and Country is licensed in multiple states, so you are not only inspected by the New Jersey Board of Pharmacy, but you are inspected by all the other boards of pharmacies of states where you hold a license. It's a privilege. Yeah, it's fairly rigorous inspection standard, and then goes for other pharmacies around the country as well. So these notions that drug makers put out there that somehow state licensed compounding pharmacies are not preparing safe drugs, it is largely nonsense. There are always bad actors, even among drug makers. We want to talk about some of the findings of FDA inspections of drug makers. Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, neither one have entirely clean hands in that regard. And I think we ought to focus on the fact that both compounding pharmacies and drug makers have a shared interest in assuring patient safety.